Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. Well, regular viewers will notice that we have moved to a temporary new studio with the Palace of Westminster behind us. And while the look might be a bit different, you will still, I promise you, get the same discussion and insights about the royal family. Here to discuss The Crown, Harry's new biography and the latest royal news and much, much more are two old friends of the show, the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English and the paper's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. And
Hello.
a reminder that you can check out more about what we're discussing and wearing today in the links below. Rebecca, I'm going to come to you first. You were with the new Prince of Wales yesterday. What was he up to?
It was a really busy day actually. They were packing in the royal engagements and I was with the Prince of Wales at a very cool venue. Don't know why I was there.
Please,
called
you're the coolest.
The Garden Cinema, and he was there in his role as patron of the Royal African Film Society to publicise Film Africa. There was a slightly awkward moment where this incredible female British-Nigerian film mogul was talking to him very excitedly about her new film she's got coming out that's actually been picked up and is going mainstream on Netflix on Friday. And she's very proud because it's based on one of Nigeria's most famous plays. But she was like, William, you know, make sure you watch it Friday, Netflix and chill. And it was slightly awkward, obviously, because Netflix is not a popular
it's quite a dirty word in the royal household.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But William was very classy. He smiled, he nodded absolutely and asked us some more questions about it.
Now, are you going to become the Prince and Princess of Wales's new best friend the way you were the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall?
They're quite different on royal engagements. They keep people at quite arm's length, and they're very they get in and they very much focus on the people that they're seeing there. But he was very good with people. Said he learnt a lot and was looking at ways to try and link his role as president of BAFTA up with the Film Africa. So good. He's already looking at how he can think a little bit more laterally in this new role.
That's brilliant.
It's quite impressive.
Now, I understand the King and Queen aren't living at Buckingham Palace yet, but in some ways it's back in action.
Yeah, so yesterday was the first time we've seen big receptions at Buckingham Palace since royal mourning ended. And of course, Buckingham Palace is always the Queen's official London residence, but obviously in her latter years of her life, she didn't live there as much. She was mainly at Windsor, partly through age and growing infirmity, but also the COVID pandemic. And because there's building work going on, it's kind of almost like it's been, I know, stopped in time, but there were two big receptions there yesterday held by the King and the Queen to highlight the British, Ugandan, Asian community and also to honour British Olympians and Paralympians. And there's about 700 people going through the doors, and they felt like it was a real buzz about it yesterday and that the palace is back in action again. And that's something I think we're going to see a lot more of now over the next weeks and months.
Interesting. I can't wait for the refurb there. The toilet's needed, I can tell you that. But Richard, one of the dominant royal stories this week has of course been the return of The Crown on Netflix, and not everyone's thrilled about it, are they?
No, they're really not. There's a lot of, there's anticipation. It hasn't actually even been broadcast yet, this series. Yes, it's very controversial and it's got very close to the current day. So it's very sensitive, the whole subject, really. And
naturally, Rebecca, some people are also saying, oh, for goodness sake, it's clearly a fictionalised telling of the story. What a load of fuss about nothing. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I have to say, I was in that camp formerly. I thought it was historical, it was pretty well done. I felt it was a bit of a storm in a teacup. Some of the kind of, isn't it awful? And I think the royal family previously has probably benefited out of it more than that they've lost. But I was, as I said earlier on, I got to see a full transcript of the next 10 episodes. And I'm not going to lie, I was actually really shocked. And I think it's actually verging on the defamatory now.
Really?
I was really surprised. You've got a couple of things to mention. William, for example, of course, last year over the Bashir scandal said very clearly that he found that whole episode so traumatic and that his mother was so manipulated at a very vulnerable stage in her life that he didn't want to see it broadcast again or used for dramatic purposes. And yet Netflix have not only just put it over one episode but over 2 episodes, this whole storyline. And there's one segment where you see Diana skidding in her car, and she thinks her brakes have failed. But she then said, "Oh, it might just need, someone's tampered with it, but it might just be that,
So that's like leaning into that age-old conspiracy theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very, very close to the bone, and obviously the infamous Camillagate tapes of the 1990s. Again, I understand that, they want to touch on it because it was something very significant that happened in the royal family's life at that period. But they don't just touch on it, they replicate everything in those tapes, word for word, in a really kind of lascivious way. And you've got the actors of Charles and Camilla reading out that dialogue over scenes of the royal family picking up the papers in the morning and looking shocked. And you see actors like Dominic Webb, brilliant actors who've in publicity junkets have said, well, actually, we're not trying to blame the individuals themselves. They were clearly not at fault here. We blame the papers for publishing it at the time. And he's right, that was indefensible in my opinion. But that doesn't give you carte blanche to go and repeat it all again X amount of years down the line. What are you benefiting out of it? Entertainment.
I mean, the thing is, we've had sort of some royal dramas in the past where they've touched on these events, but they've always been kind of things no one's taken very seriously. But The Crown, because it's such a big budget, Netflix, so much hype, it really is a whole different level, and that's...
It does, the production values of it, and certainly when I look at the first and second series, you do perceive it as fact, don't you? Because it's so well done, it almost reads like a documentary, almost.
Well, you've got brilliant actors, some of the best acting talent out there, and so much spent on each episode that it's fantastic to watch, that sort of takes you with it.
Yeah.
But then you know that you're dealing with lives of people very recently, and people that will really be just damaged by this.
I tell you, I doubt that Princes William or Harry will watch it, but even as a bystander to it all, Elizabeth Debicki as Diana is terrifyingly on point. It's like watching a ghost.
Yeah, and that must be very strange for them, and probably pretty traumatic. I mean, they have scenes in it that imagining conversations between William and his mother about the Bashir interview, about her ringing him up and telling her about new boyfriend she's got. It's stuff that I think... I'm not sure there might not be a backlash about this, because there's some stuff that's pretty distasteful, I have to say.
Backlash or not, it seems that there will be another series, Richard.
Yes, I mean, that's already been confirmed. This is season number 5, and originally the idea was to end it with this series. But then, because it's so successful, they decided to do another one. And that's going up to the early 2000s.
Well, the last I'd heard was that they would take it up to the death of the Queen.
No, well, I think it was up to the Diamond Jubilee celebrations,
right,
perhaps.
okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But who knows if that's just as popular. Maybe we'll see one with Meghan entering the scene, and it could be a chance for her to return to acting, playing herself.
And of course, the difference is, but previously, that what they hadn't counted on is that a lot of the people whose lives they were dramatising in the earlier series, many of them are not around anymore.
Yeah.
But of course, they are now dramatising the lives for people who this is a pretty recent memory, and very difficult memories and very painful memories.
Which makes me wonder, they have a policy of never complain, never explain, famously, but do you think that some of the things that you've observed about this series of The Crown will mean the palace will be moved to make an official statement in some way?
So the impression I've got is that they don't want to fuel the flames yet. I think they want to see it for themselves. They've obviously, spoken to people, and they know what they've read about what they believe to be contained in it. They want to see it for themselves. But I think it might be one of those occasions where they're pushed to say something. As I say, I honestly felt some of it, and I'm not being a drama queen, but I do think some of it verged on, defamatory.
You're just making me want to watch it all, I'm afraid to say. But Richard, inevitably, given that it is a Netflix production, questions will be raised again about Prince Harry's commercial relationships with Netflix. What's your view?
I mean, what a situation we're in. No?
Do you think he'll distance himself?
Here we are talking about sort of how damaging this could be and how dreadful, and then Harry and Meghan signed this deal for a rumoured $100 million with Netflix. And even more, he promoted the programme. You know, he was asked by his mate James Corden about it, and said, actually, you know what, it's quite realistic in some ways. So he's helped to promote it as well.
Gosh, I'd forgotten about that.
So no, forget the idea that that, you know, he'll be condemning it. Quite the opposite. They're going to be, from what we've heard, they're going to be promoting the Harry and Meghan show, the docuseries, at the end of the when they stop broadcasting The Crown in December.
Oh, so it's not classy, is it?
No, it really isn't. And those two things are inextricably linked.
And I'm presuming he should still have the right to be able to say, even privately behind the scenes, I disagree with this, because I suppose their production company is signed up to Netflix, but he is, as a person, I don't know what kind of deals or what kind of handcuffs they're given for these.
Well, sure, but even if he said that, he could say, look, I don't really like this, whatever. They can just ignore him, can't they?
Well, they could, yeah, and they will. And they clearly have, if he has
So
said
we'll have a
anything.
situation where Harry will, you know, almost certainly be talking about the exploitation of his mother, while the Crown is exploiting his mother.
Yeah, exactly.
Happy days. Let's move on. We're going to talk to you about some of our comments now. We've had a few comments on this that I wanted to share. Lots of comments on The Crown. Liv McNaughton agrees with our panel, who the other week said that they should definitely put that this is fiction, not factual, on the screen before it's shown on TV. And Deborah Page, meanwhile, says, personally, I can't wait for The Crown. I love it, and anyone that takes it seriously and doesn't realise yet that a lot of it is fiction for dramatic purposes is frankly thick. There you go. Everyone keeps saying it's a load of tosh, including the royal friends. Well, if that's the case, what are they all so worried about? All the constant talk about it just makes people want to watch it more. NMR says, although Harry's book will sell quite a bit in the first week, I think ultimately it will be a dud. That's the last word on that then, probably not. We love hearing your questions in the comments, so do write to us on social media @MailPlus, or you can email palace@mailplus.co.uk and we'll answer a couple of questions from you a bit later on. Well, that last question, or the last comment rather, about Harry leads us nicely to our next talking point. Rebecca, we had a week off last week, so we haven't discussed the big story. Harry's book, which now has a title, Spare. What can you tell us? What do you think?
Well, I mean, kudos to the publishers. They've really kept this under wraps, which, considering it's being translated into 16 different languages, including English, is no mean feat. We now learn that it's going to be published on January the 10th, which is a surprise to a lot in the publishing industry, who thought that they would want to capitalise on the Christmas rush. Someone I spoke to said to me would never hold something of this magnitude over until January. And I've been told it's twofold, because he has asked to make changes, but also I think there's an issue in America with actually getting the raw goods to publish books, and they've also got Michelle Obama's book, and that there might be an issue.
Oh, you mean like
with physically
paper.
Yes, exactly, and the binding of books, trying to get it out. But obviously, most provocative, I think, is the title, Spare. I've seen some very funny memes, as I'm sure you all have on social media. Probably the only one I can actually mention on air is Spare Us, written after it.
I know.
The others are a little bit more explicit. But it's the Palace are being really careful about this. They don't want to engage until they hear what's in it. But people I've spoken to who are kind of well plumbed into the situation find that title very, very provocative indeed.
Am finding it really shocking that nobody has been able to slip anyone in the royal family an advance copy. Surely.
They didn't even know what the title was until it was announced publicly in a press release. They were reading it on social media, his family, the royal household, at the same time we were. And I think that probably tells you all you need to know.
Absolutely. What have you been hearing about it, Richard? Is what you've heard, what you've been expecting?
I was on holiday last week when I received this press release from the publisher.
Where were you on holiday?
I was in sunny Devon, actually.
Nice, yeah.
And anyway, I saw this, you know, the photograph on the front, my goodness, you know, it's a bit like a sort of police mugshot, isn't it? That very stark.
Can I tell you, my teenage daughter just said, yeah, all right, Harry, back off from the camera, back away.
You're
too
right.
close.
Yeah, it's almost a sort of passive-aggressive shot, but it's very similar to the cover of the other bestseller that the ghostwriter did with Andre Agassi, tennis superstar. Again, that was a one-word title and a very similar front cover. But for me, it's so significant, that word spare. You know, it just conjures so many images of self-pity, really, it has to be said. He's the spare. And when you look at some of the translations, like in Spanish it was en la sombra, so in the shadows. Again, it's...
Can you do that Spanish again for all your Eden fans? I bet they'll like that.
En la sombra.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's all sort of woe-is-me, I'm the one, I've had such a hard time and everything. You know, you forget this is a prince born into privilege. He's had every privilege in the world, and now he's got, American firms like Netflix throwing millions at him. Spare us the self-pity.
Let's talk about that word spare for just a second, because, again, as I often say, as an Aussie, I'd always heard, oh yeah, you have the air and the spare. But it's always been like a bit of a wry joke, and clearly Harry hasn't taken it that way. But I don't think I've ever heard anybody use it in a really derogatory context.
No, and in fact, when he was younger, Harry actually quite revelled in it. Ken Worf, Princess Diana's former bodyguard, recounts how they were in the car once and Harry was playing up being naughty and William was trying to admonish him, and basically Harry said, well, it doesn't matter, I can do what I want, because basically I'm not going to have the responsibility that you will have. And I remember very distinctly when Prince George and Princess Charlotte were born, and I think it was Prince George, Harry was asked by a broadcaster how he felt about going down the pecking order, and his answer, I think, was so illuminating. He basically said, great. Like, it means basically I'm one less away from all of that stress and strain and responsibility that comes with being the heir to the throne. So where did that change happen? Why did he start viewing it differently?
Yeah, maybe it'll be in the book.
Because it was made very clear to me and others towards the latter stages of his life within the royal family that actually he got quite annoyed by the fact that he was playing second fiddle to William.
Yeah.
He felt that there was a rush to get everything he wanted to done, which I find remarkable. I mean, someone pointed out to me on social media, and I think it's such a good point, Princess Anne was the spare at one point and obviously went down the pecking order, and she's bossed it all her life, she hasn't given a damn. She's gone out, she's done great work on behalf of the royal family and for this country, so why couldn't he do the same? Why the negative connotation?
Maybe we'll find out. Now, you touched on it earlier, the reports of the book going back and forth with the ghostwriter in the wake of the Queen's passing. Do you think there's been any change of heart in Harry at all about the book? Do you think he's now dreading January 10?
I don't think he is. I mean, I think, as I say, that cover was quite challenging, that picture. It was
confrontational.
I think it was. And, I mean, look, there's been a lot of speculation, and I can't claim to be the oracle on it, but from what I've heard is he did go back to the publishers after his grandmother died. He asked to be able to recognise her passing in the text. I've been told that he did want to make some changes, but interestingly, not just the publishers, but the ghostwriter didn't want too many changes to be made. I presume because he's putting his name to a work that he wants to be strong and powerful and readable, and he doesn't want it watered down either. So it sounds like some changes have been made, but definitely not everything that Harry wanted.
So I think that let's not underestimate the significance of it being put back to January, because initially we were told it was going to come out in the autumn. They'd said that explicitly. And remember, in Britain, I know that about 85% of all books are sold in the run-up to Christmas. So bringing out a book in January is extraordinary. You'd never normally do that. And it's almost as if they're not that bothered about sales. It's kind of been buried. And if you see...
I don't think that's true. No. I think they're just confident that whenever they put it out, it will be a gangbuster.
Well, we'll see. But also, it just seems maybe it's a sort of thing from Harry, a psychological thing, that he kind of wants it to be buried slightly. He doesn't want...
I don't know. Well, you say that, but even if what you say comes to pass, he'll presumably be doing a publicity tour where any of the more incendiary points will be picked over and over and over again.
I mean, yes, I mean, the publisher will have wanted maximum sales for the book, of course, but Harry has talked about all the proceeds going to charity. So it doesn't actually make any difference to him personally, financially, if the book, how many copies it sells, whether it comes out in autumn or not. But yeah, he'll be giving lots of interviews. And what we've seen from Meghan while she's been promoting her Archetypes podcast series is that each time she gives an interview, there's more controversy.
Oh, yeah.
And, more digs at the royal family and that type of thing. So we can expect to hear a lot more from him.
I think, as I do think Harry wants this to do well. He staked a lot on this, as have the publishers. Even if you were to say, some of the figures that have been bandied around, 15, 18, 20, 25 million, even if that's only half right, from the publishing experts I speak to, that is many, many millions more than anybody would normally get.
Yes.
And that money is all paid out, as it's been described to me, in advance to him. Where the publishers make their money, they get the money coming in back from the sale. So they've got to make this book a bestseller. Otherwise, they are going to lose a serious amount of money.
And it's not the only book by him that we can expect, is it?
No, not from what I've been told.
It's part of a deal.
What about if there are things in there that do ultimately anger the palace or even personally the king? There's now talk of the possibility of Harry's titles being stripped. Do you think that's a fair assumption?
I don't actually. I know there's been a lot of speculation, and in this business you can never say never, but every time I've raised that previously with senior officials or sources, it's come back in a very negative context. You know, we mustn't forget that after her divorce from the Prince of Wales, then Prince of Wales, Diana was stripped of her HRH and became Diana, Princess of Wales, and there's a lot of feeling around that move actually contributed to the fact that she very tragically lost her life, that she didn't have the police protection she would have normally had. And I know people I've spoken to have always felt that if they were to do that, it would be seen as a very punitive move on Harry and one that could backfire on them. Of course, if he, in this book, he really dumps on his family and I think a lot of people feel everything he's done is constantly moving down that road of disrespecting the Queen and her legacy. I think if people felt that he'd gone too far down that road, it might happen and people might be willing to support it because they would say enough's enough. But I know historically there's been quite a reluctance to even consider this.
Oh my gosh, January feels like a long way away to wait for this book, but let's move on now. Let's take a look at some of your questions. Quiet Australian writes, that's a fake name, there's no such thing as a Quiet Australian. Love the show. I am wondering if we could get some more information about the late Queen's cousins who are working royals, the Duke of Kent, Princess Alexandra and so on. I assume they are continuing their work. Does King Charles value their work as much as Queen Elizabeth would have done? And are they part of his new version of the monarchy? That's a lot of questions. Rebecca, can you answer any of them?
Actually, very much so, quite simply. In fact, just last night, Buckingham Palace made a point of issuing a picture of the Olympic reception at Buckingham Palace with the King and the Queen Consort. And in that picture was Princess Anne and the Earl of Wessex and the Duke of Gloucester. And they made a point of issuing it that the family are here and they're supporting our new monarch and his wife. My understanding is, I mean, look, most of them are only in their 80s now. The Duke of Kent in particular is looking increasingly frail. And, you know, they do a limited amount of duties every year. My understanding has always been that they would be allowed to do that until it came to a natural end and that, you know, Prince of Wales, now King Charles, will support his mother's cousins until that happens. And then they won't be drawing other members of the royal family in to take their position.
There you go, Quiet Australian. There's your answer. Seabiscuit writes, you can't tell me William, nor Kate, nor Charles have never had moments where they didn't treat the staff well all the time. So why is only Meghan being called out? Oh, Richard, this is a fun one for you to answer. I think it's a good question. Well,
look, I'm a social diarist, and believe me, if we had stories about, you know, bad behaviour by any of the royals, we will publish them.
Really?
Definitely,
okay.
yeah.
This is Richard we're talking about. Of course he would.
No, you're right. I haven't even had a drink yet. You're
think
right.
about it, over the years, there have been so many stories about Prince Andrew, really, you know, being rude to someone or something like that, or even Princess Anne being, you know, very gruff at some point. But the reason we haven't run them is because we don't have them. And in the case of the allegations about Meghan's bullying, that they came out only because they were leaked to the Times. You know, Valentine Lowe ran them in his paper because he had that information about emails that were exchanged and that type of thing. So, you know, if we have stories, we will run them. But of course, we're not just going to run something that we can't stand up.
So if you've got any stories, let us know. HLB writes, what is happening to giving Edward the title of Duke of Edinburgh? Rebecca, what is happening there?
Well, obviously this has only been mooted. We've never actually heard any official confirmation from Buckingham Palace that this was going to happen, but we have been told by various sources that it was the Queen's wishes. My understanding is they're not rushing to make any decisions. They're really focusing on the King's first 100 days as monarch. There's a lot he wants and needs to achieve in that time. And they tend to do these things around a significant birthday or a significant event. Obviously, we've got the coronation next year. In 2 years' time, Edward will turn 60. Could that be a moment? I mean, there have been reports with some people saying that the king may decide not to do that because he doesn't want to be seen to be handing out titles like confetti. But the Duke of Edinburgh has obviously got particular resonance for the family.
And it's got a particular charitable significance now as well.
Obviously, the Duke of Edinburgh Awards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's now as a charity. It's a bit like the Prince's Trust. It's kind of established in its own right and it's self-funding. It has its own governance, but they would still want a strong link with it. And Edward and actually his wife Sophie are ambassadors for it on the global stage. So.
Okay. Well, Lisa M writes, great programme. Love all the experts. Thanks, Lisa. Could you cover all the grace and favour homes in an episode, who lives where, etc.? Well, guess what? I can answer that one. I have spoken to our producer and we will be covering that topic in a future show. So a reminder, please keep leaving your questions in the comments because it does give us some ideas for shows as well as everything else. So write to us on social media at Mail Plus, or you can email palace@mailplus.co.uk. Now, another reminder that a friend of the show, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, Richard's best friend, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, will be on a special episode of Palace on Monday to talk about her new book, Elizabeth and Philip. And that should be absolutely fascinating as well as very lively. We just have time now to say thank you to Rebecca and Richard, and to you, of course, for watching. We will see you next week.